Welcome to Tom's True Crime. Today we take you to Elkhart County, Indiana. Friday, August 5th, 2005. Middlebury police received a call from a concerned woman requesting a welfare check at a local residence. The woman said that she couldn't get a hold of her sister, 41-year-old Barbara Keim. In the summer of 2005, Barbara Keim was looking for a fresh start. The 41-year-old mother of two had just recently finalized her second divorce and was readjusting to life as a single parent. Barbara, born in May of 1964, and had spent her whole life living in Elkhart County, Indiana. She was part of a big family, having one brother and four sisters, who she was especially close with. Growing up, Barbara was known for being the nurturer of the family. She was always caring for others, was deeply compassionate, and had a way of making people feel at ease. Because of these qualities, as Barbara grew older, she seemed naturally drawn to the healthcare field. She became a registered nurse and began working at the Elkhart General Hospital in obstetrics. In her early 20s, Barbara met and fell in love with a fellow Elkhart native, an aspiring minister named Alex Stone. The two bonded over their mutual devout Christian faith and ended up marrying not long after, beginning their careers. In March of 1988, they welcomed their daughter Hannah into the world. Although the marriage ultimately came to an end a couple of years later, after Barbara and Alex drifted apart, the split was amicable, both of them agreeing that their daughter was their top priority. For the next 5 years, Barbara settled into a new routine. She got a second chance at love when she met Elkhart County Sheriff's Deputy, Barbara Keim. The two married, and 4 years later, Barbara was ecstatic when she gave birth to her second child, Timothy. The blended family was happy for the most part. Barbara soon learned that the situation didn't come without its challenges. By the time her son was born, Hannah was almost a teenager. At times, she felt like she didn't know where she fit within the family dynamic. As always, Barbara was there to reassure her, telling Hannah that she loved her more than anything. Sadly, things got even tougher when Barbara's second marriage also came to an end. Barbara did her best to navigate the complicated situation. She came to a custody agreement with Robert. Barbara, Hannah, and Timothy moved into a 2-bedroom apartment in the town of Middlebury. By the summer of 2005, Barbara seemed to be back on track. She was working at a job she still loved and doing everything she could to be there for her kids. She was more active than ever at her local church. Then out of nowhere, she vanished on the evening of August 5, 2005. In the early morning hours of August 7, 2005, a couple of officers from Indiana's Goshen Police Department were on patrol when they saw something that caught their attention. In the parking lot of a local motel, they spotted 2 minivans which had been left parked side by side in an area directly facing the line of rooms for rent. While a couple of minivans normally wouldn't have been much cause for concern, the officers were pretty sure that they recognized these specific vehicles. That's because both of them were the subject of be on the lookout alert that they had received from a neighboring police department the previous day. After confirming the license plates of the 2 vans, the officers called for backup. They surrounded the motel room that had been linked to the vehicles. They were about to discover what was waiting for them inside wasn't at all what they expected. When Barbara Keim's sister requested a welfare check on her, she told police that several other people were supposed to be with her that day. However, those people hadn't seen her either. That Friday was supposed to be a busy day for Barbara. In the morning, she had a shift at the hospital, after which she had scheduled to meet with her real estate agent in the afternoon to look at houses. In the evening, she was supposed to pick up her 5-year-old son Timothy from his father's house and had planned to have dinner with her sister, the same one who was now on the phone with police. Barbara's sister said that it was out of character for her to miss one of these things, but for her to not show up for any of them was extremely concerning. She was very diligent and responsible and wasn't the kind of person to miss an appointment or not turn up without so much as a phone call. Upon arriving at Barbara's home, located in a small 2-story rental building, police immediately spotted Barbara Keim's red Pontiac minivan in the parking lot outside the front door to her apartment. The front door to her apartment was unlocked. When officers went inside, they found a place completely quiet. While there were no signs of forced entry, a struggle, or anything else suggesting that crime had taken place, a quick sweep of the apartment revealed something even more concerning. Barbara wasn't the only one missing. Her 17-year-old daughter, Hannah Stone, was also nowhere to be found. Because neither woman had officially been reported missing, and there was no obvious evidence that a crime had been committed, Police were limited in what they could do inside the residence without a search warrant. But they did make note of a couple of seemingly important things. For starters, in one of the rooms of the apartment, Barbara's purse was laying out in plain sight. Her wallet had been removed from the bag, and upon closer inspection, cash, credit, and debit cards were missing. Barbara's ID was still there. Understandably, this didn't sit right with police. If Barbara had simply gone out somewhere, it was unlikely that she would have left her personal ID while simply grabbing her cash and cards. Also, why hadn't she taken her van? The other thing that caught the attention of officers was a glass full of cigarette butts. It had been left sitting on a table in the living room. It initially stuck out to police because it seemed out of place in the otherwise immaculately clean apartment. Sure enough, when officers spoke to Barbara's sister, she confirmed that this was highly unusual. Barbara hated cigarettes and never would have allowed anyone to smoke inside her house. After reaching the limit of what they could do with the scene without a warrant, Middlebury police spoke to other friends and family of Barbara and Hannah. Through this, they were able to determine that Barbara had last been seen at around 7:30 p.m. on August 4th, the night before her sister had called police. Hannah was a little harder to pin down because she had less of a set routine due to her age. It was also summer break, so she wasn't in school when officers questioned neighbors at the Criderview apartments. They didn't have much to offer either. No one had seen anything out of the ordinary in the lead-up to the disappearances. But at least one tenant had heard what sounded like a commotion going on in the hallway on the night of August 4th. The man said that he thought it was only a minor domestic situation. He had decided not to call the police. With that, officers put out an attempt to locate notice for Barbara and Hannah and contacted other departments in the area asking them to keep a lookout as well. At this point, they still had no evidence that a crime had actually taken place, so they were not officially declared missing. In the meantime, family and friends began to put up posters all around town, hoping that someone might come forward with useful information. However, unbeknownst to everyone, things were about to take a turn. By the morning of August 6th, concerns for Barbara Keim and her daughter Hannah Stone were quickly spreading across Elkhart County. Even though there was no evidence of foul play, neither of them had been heard from for more than 36 hours. By this point, any attempts to locate and contact them had all been unsuccessful. Deciding that they needed to find some way to push the case forward, police reached out to Hannah's father, Barbara's first husband, Alex Stone. Alex said that he didn't have any idea where his daughter or ex-wife were. However, he did agree to file a missing persons report for Hannah. By this point, police had also received a call from Barbara's other ex-husband, Robert Keim. He said that he also didn't know where Barbara and Hannah were. He confirmed that Barbara was supposed to have picked up their son for a routine custody exchange on August 4th. With little to no new information from either of these interviews, police were essentially at a dead end. That was until they received another call that sent them reeling. A neighbor of Barbara's at the Criderview apartments had just seen something suspicious happening outside their building. It turned out that what this neighbor had seen was two people, a man and a woman, who had come from what they believed was inside Barbara's apartment. The pair had carried full black garbage bags through the parking lot and loaded cardboard boxes into the back of the red Pontiac minivan before driving off. The witness hadn't gotten a good look at either person, but they were sure that the woman wasn't Barbara. All they could say for sure was that the female was dark-haired and heavy-set, and the man she was with was tall and skinny. By the time officers rushed over to the residence, the unknown man and woman were long gone, along with Barbara's vehicle. That wasn't all. When they went back inside the apartment, it was obvious the place had been cleaned. Several items, including the cigarette butts, Barbara's purse, wallet, and ID, were no longer there. It appeared that whoever these mysterious people were, they didn't want police collecting potential evidence from the scene. While this was an obvious blow to the investigation, it was beneficial to police. There was now enough to suggest that a crime, likely a double kidnapping, had taken place. Finally, police had the grounds to launch a full investigation. Officers started by releasing an updated alert for Barbara and Hannah. By this time, they had learned that Hannah also had a vehicle, a second minivan, which was missing. The descriptions of the vehicles and their license plate information were added alongside physical descriptions of Barbara and Hannah. At the same time, investigators subpoenaed Barbara's cell phone and financial records, both of which quickly led to unsettling discoveries. The 41-year-old's phone records revealed steady activity right up until the night of August 4th. From that point on, there was nothing. The banking information was a little different, but told a similarly unnerving story. At around 10 p.m. that night, someone had tried to make a series of withdrawals from Barbara's credit union account from an ATM. Most of these attempts had been unsuccessful. Eventually, the maximum of $200 had been withdrawn. This was especially concerning because family members said that Barbara almost never took money out from ATMs. One other suspicious transaction on Barbara's account was even more alarming. It was a check for $800, and it had been cashed on August 5th, after it was believed Barbara and Hannah had already gone missing. The check was marked as being for vehicle repairs and was made out to a person named Aaron McDonald. Upon seeing the name Aaron McDonald on the check, cashed from Barbara's account, investigators with the Middlebury Police Department immediately sprang into action. They knew exactly who Aaron was, a local 17-year-old with whom they'd had minor run-ins before. It also turned out that Aaron knew Hannah Stone through church and school. When Aaron was brought in for questioning, he said that he knew nothing about either Hannah or her mother's disappearance. In fact, he claimed that he didn't even know that they were missing. He also stated that the check he had cashed the previous day was for vehicle repairs. As proof, he gave them the name of a friend who he said had worked on the car with him. Police let Aaron go, but they were extremely skeptical of his vehicle repair claims, especially because when asked what he had been working on, he said the transmission. The transmission is one of the most notoriously complicated and time-consuming parts of a vehicle to fix. It is generally not something you would want done by an unqualified mechanic. As a result, their next stop was to check the teen's alibi. Luckily, Aaron's friend wasn't hard to track down. When he was brought in for questioning, police could immediately tell that something was up. He was extremely nervous and was reluctant to talk, but after some encouragement from both his mother and investigators, he started to open up. The friend stated that Aaron had not been with him at the times that he had provided to police. Furthermore, the two of them had never fixed any vehicles belonging to Barbara Keim. Instead, he said that Aaron simply told him he had recently come into some money and had instructed him to lie if he was ever questioned about it. When asked why he had been reluctant to share this information, the boy said that he feared that he might be in danger. This was because Aaron had suggested that the money was tied to some sort of crime. The friend didn't have any more details to give, but he was able to provide police with the name of another person who was supposedly involved. Another teenager named Spenser Krempetz. Just like Aaron McDonald, the name Spenser Krempetz was one that police immediately recognized. Spenser was 18 years old and was also from the local area. Whereas Aaron was generally regarded as a quiet kid from a good family, Spenser had the opposite reputation. He had grown up in a troubled household where he had been the victim of physical and sexual abuse from an early age. Despite being quite intelligent, he had struggled academically. He attended 13 different schools before leaving home at the age of 16. After that, he stayed with anyone who would let him. By his early teens, he had also started using heavy drugs. He was known by those around town for walking around in a black trench coat. While he had never done anything all that serious from a legal standpoint, people were intimidated by him, and police viewed Spenser as an attention seeker and a troublemaker. Before investigators could get a handle on this new information, they received a call from fellow officers in the adjacent city of Goshen. They had made a major discovery. At around 3:40 a.m. on August 7, 2005, officers from the Goshen Police Department spotted two minivans parked side by side in the parking lot of a local motel. The vehicles immediately caught their attention because they resembled those featured in a BOLO alert that had been issued the previous day by police in the neighboring town of Middlebury. When officers ran the plates of the two vehicles, they came back as registered to the two missing people featured in the alert: 41-year-old Barbara Keim and 17-year-old Hannah Stone. Realizing that the mother and daughter had been missing for more than 48 hours by this point, police knew that they needed to act quickly and called for backup. At the same time, they checked with the clerk at the front desk of the motel, who revealed that they indeed rented a room to someone associated with the two vehicles. That person's name was Spenser Krempetz. After surrounding the motel and getting into position, police prepared to make entry into the room in question. As they did, they hoped that they weren't too late to rescue their two missing victims. However, when they finally went inside, they encountered something entirely different from what they expected. Upon entering, unannounced, officers spotted two people lying in bed together. It was Spenser Krempetz and Hannah Stone. While some of Barbara's possessions were in the room, it didn't take long to determine that Barbara herself wasn't there. Spenser and Hannah appeared unharmed. It seemed that they were uninterested in talking to police. They were taken into custody without a word. Around the same time, as news of the discovery made its way back to Middlebury, police officers paid a second visit to Aaron McDonald, who was also placed under arrest. Considering their prior interaction with Aaron and the fact that they had already caught him in a lie, investigators decided to question him first. The choice soon paid off. This time, Aaron was ready to tell the truth. The story he proceeded to share was truly the stuff of nightmares. Aaron explained that everything had started a few months ago, when Hannah had met Spenser while hanging out with friends at a local music spot and cafe in Middlebury that was popular with teenagers. The two of them hit it off. They started dating almost immediately. The relationship became a source of tension between Hannah and her mom. Up until now, the 17-year-old had already been going through a rebellious phase. But in Barbara's mind, Hannah's relationship with Spenser was a step too far. Barbara didn't like the way Spenser behaved. She was concerned about his drug use and felt that overall, he would lead Hannah down a bad path. The situation resulted in escalating arguments between the mother and daughter, with Barbara forbidding Hannah from seeing Spenser. She continued until finally things came to a head in late July. Barbara gave Hannah an ultimatum. When she chose Spenser, she kicked her out of the house. Aaron said that after this, Hannah was fuming over what had happened. For the next few days, she and Spenser talked incessantly about how unfair the situation was. That was until Hannah said she was ready to do something about it. Aaron said that they had been smoking weed together at his house. One day, when Hannah said that she wanted to solve her problem with her mother permanently. In order to do that, she said she and Spenser would need his help. At first, Aaron said he wanted nothing to do with any of whatever they were planning. But he claimed that they were persistent. He finally agreed after they promised him $400 in exchange. He obtained a handgun from someone he knew, as well as some other items they would need. On the night of August 4th, Aaron explained that he, Hannah, and Spenser had driven to Barbara's apartment where they knew that she would be alone. When they got there, Hannah knocked on the door, saying that she needed to get some of her clothes. As soon as Barbara opened the door, Aaron and Spenser, who had been waiting out of view, rushed forward. By the time Barbara started to scream, it was already too late. Spenser had tackled her to the ground and Aaron had pointed the gun in her face, telling her to be quiet. Spenser proceeded to duct tape Barbara's hands, mouth, and eyes. In the meantime, Hannah went into another room and rifled through her mother's purse, grabbing her cash, credit, and debit cards. When she went back into the living room where Barbara was being held, Aaron said that Hannah pretended that she had also been ambushed and restrained. They figured that if Barbara thought she was in danger, she would give them the information they needed to access her bank accounts faster. The sick ruse worked. Barbara had handed over her PIN. Once the group had the information they wanted, Aaron stated that he and Spenser carried Barbara to one of the minivans, throwing her inside before driving away. Hannah stayed behind just in case any neighbors had heard the attack, with the idea being that if police were called, Hannah could talk them into believing that everything was fine. After taking off in the van, Spenser drove Aaron and Barbara to an ATM where they intended to pull out as much cash as possible. Aaron made several failed attempts to withdraw large sums of money before finally realizing that there were limits on both the machine and Barbara's account. He withdrew the maximum of $200 before getting back into the van, at which point they took off once again. Aaron told police that from here, Spenser drove around aimlessly for what felt like hours until he finally stopped in a rural area just over the line into Kosciuszko County. Chillingly, he said that the entire time Barbara was begging and pleading with them to let her go. After parking, Spenser walked Barbara into a cornfield. At first, Aaron said he started to follow, but he quickly got cold feet. He walked back to the minivan and waited there until he heard the unmistakable sound of a gunshot. When Spenser returned, he was alone. He was extremely hyped up, had blood on his face, and was making animal-like growling sounds. Aaron explained that after Barbara's murder, he and Spenser went back to the apartment to meet up with Hannah. On the way, they split the $200 they had stolen from her bank account and stopped off to buy more weed, cigarettes, and rolling papers. The three spent most of the rest of the night smoking together in Barbara's apartment. As if the situation couldn't get more chilling, Aaron said that the others seemed like they were in a great mood, particularly Hannah. At one point, she laughed about the blood on Spenser's face. Later on, Hannah said, "I love that my mom is dead." Aaron said that he went home a bit later on, but when he woke up the next morning, he still felt that he had been shortchanged on the $400 he was promised. At some point, just hours before Barbara Keim's sister first called police, he went back to the apartment, found Barbara's checkbook, and wrote the fraudulent check for $800. That check ended up linking him to the crime. Following this horrifying confession, Aaron agreed to take police to the location where Barbara's body was. That evening, Aaron led them into the cornfield in Kosciuszko County. It was near the intersection of County Roads 1300 North and 700 West, just a couple of miles south of Napanee, Indiana. Barbara Keim's body was there, just as Aaron had described. She had been killed by a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. With Barbara's body recovered in Aaron's detailed confession, police confronted the other two suspects, Spenser and Hannah. Like Aaron, Spenser almost immediately offered a full confession, providing horrifying new details. He said that after walking Barbara into the cornfield on the night of the murder, he had told her to recite the Lord's Prayer because he knew she was a devout Christian. He said he wanted to see if God would save her. In an unfathomable bit of evil and cruelty, Spenser listened while Barbara said the prayer. He then said to Barbara, "Aren't you going to say amen?" When she did, he shot her in the back of her head. Spenser told police that he had been fascinated by death for some time. He said it felt good to take someone's soul. He claimed that he had done what he did out of love for Hannah, who was the person who really wanted to commit the crime. Of the three, Hannah was the only one to completely deny any involvement, even after being presented with everything police knew up until that point. She offered just partial admissions, saying that she thought Spenser and Aaron just wanted to rob her mom, and that murder had never been part of the plan. Feeling that all of the suspects were equally responsible, authorities charged Hannah, Spenser, and Aaron with the same three offenses: murder, conspiracy to commit murder, and criminal confinement. While Hannah Stone, Spenser Krempetz, and Aaron McDonald each initially pleaded not guilty to the charges against them, all of them would eventually change their pleas. The first to do so was Aaron McDonald, who accepted a deal and also agreed to testify against the others should their cases go to trial. During sentencing, all three of the teens presented mitigating factors that they felt made them less responsible than the others. Both Aaron and Hannah claimed that they were scared of Spenser, and that by the time they wanted out of the crime, they were too terrified to go against him. However, the judge pointed out that neither had taken any steps, both during or after the murder, when given the opportunity. That would suggest that this was the case. In Hannah's case, the judge said she had been in the apartment by herself for a substantial period of time between the time of the kidnapping and the time of the murder. She could have called police then. In Aaron's case, the judge stated that he felt it was hard to believe he felt threatened, since for the vast majority of the crime, he was the one holding the gun. Spenser's legal team, on the other hand, went for a mental health defense, saying that his various psychological issues were to blame. As part of this, they submitted a 127-page autobiographical account of his life that he had been writing in jail that was confiscated from him. The document reportedly included the 18-year-old's disturbingly detailed account of Barbara Keim's murder, as well as his musings on life, his fascination with death, and his troubled upbringing. However, it seems that this tactic ultimately worked against him. The judge said, the insight the document provided also gave a clear picture of his intent. In particular, he pointed to a passage in the manuscript that read, "If you're going to get caught and go to jail or prison, you might as well go for something big. Go big or go home." When the trial was all over, Spenser Krempetz ended up with a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. Aaron McDonald, meanwhile, was sentenced to 62 years. Hannah Stone was given a sentence of 100 years. Following their convictions, both Aaron and Spenser attempted to appeal their sentences, saying that mitigating factors in their cases had not been appropriately considered, and their punishment did not fit the nature of their crime. However, both of their sentences were upheld. Spenser self-exited in prison in 2015. Aaron died of an overdose while incarcerated in July 2020. As for Hannah, she remains in prison. Her earliest possible release date is listed as August 31st, 2053. Thank you for being with us. If you'd like to support our channel and help us to continue to make content, please don't forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. It helps us so much and we really appreciate it. Welcome to Tom's True Crime. Today we take you to Middlebury, Vermont. In February 2013, the body of 38-year-old trooper Sarah Sinreeve was discovered in her Middlebury, Vermont home. An investigation unraveled the shocking secret of her affair with fellow state trooper Daniel Hartniak. In December 2012, at the Vermont State Police Barracks, a series of decisions and betrayals began to unfold, leading to a devastating tragedy. At 6:45 a.m., Sarah Sinreeve, a respected state trooper, is found dead in her home. Her teenage daughter, Maya, discovers the scene. Her mother lying in a pool of blood in the kitchen, a single gunshot wound to the chest. The gun, a service-issued weapon, is placed conspicuously near Sarah's hand, staged to look like a suicide. Maya, trembling, calls 911. The dispatcher's calm instructions contrast with her panicked sobs. Middlebury police and state investigators arrive quickly, led by Detective Michael Brinsifin, a no-nonsense investigator with 25 years of experience. The initial assessment raises questions. Sarah's service weapon is unusually clean, despite the blood spatter, and there are no signs of forced entry. Detective Michael Brinsifin had spent decades unraveling criminal mysteries, but the case of Trooper Sarah Sinreeve's death felt different from the start. It wasn't just the brutality of the crime that unsettled him. It was the cracks in the surface of a seemingly perfect life. Sarah Sinreeve, 38, had built a reputation as a diligent and principled state trooper. She had joined the force in her late 20s, balancing her role as a single mother with her ambition to rise in a male-dominated field. Her teenage daughter, Maya, was her world. Sarah had always put Maya first, juggling long shifts and late-night casework while making sure to attend school events, parent-teacher meetings, and their traditional Friday night movie marathons. Colleagues described her as driven but kind-hearted, someone who didn't hesitate to lend a helping hand even after a grueling day on patrol. But behind her badge and uniform, Sarah carried burdens she didn't share. After her divorce, she struggled with loneliness and a longing for connection. When Daniel Hartniak, a senior trooper in his early 40s, began showing interest in her, she couldn't help but be drawn to him. Daniel was charismatic and respected, a man with a spotless record and a calm authority that made him a natural leader. He had been with the force for nearly 2 decades and was often praised for his quick thinking in high-pressure situations. What started as friendly camaraderie between colleagues quickly deepened into something more. Daniel's marriage to Leah, a schoolteacher known for her charitable work in the community, seemed stable on the surface. They had 2 young sons, and their family photos were often featured in local newsletters. But Daniel had confided in Sarah about the cracks in his marriage, telling her he felt trapped in a life that no longer made him happy. Sarah, in turn, confided her own fears that she was unworthy of love, that she was destined to live the rest of her life alone. Their affair was passionate but fraught with tension. Sarah wanted more than stolen moments and whispered promises. She began pressing Daniel to leave Leah, telling him that they could build a life together if he was willing to take the risk. Daniel, however, was hesitant. He had too much to lose: a stable home, his standing in the community, and his spotless career. By February 14, 2018, Detective Brinsifin and his team began to piece together the complexity of Sarah's life. During the initial stages of the investigation, Maya Sinreeve had mentioned overhearing arguments between her mother and a man she worked with. This vague lead sent the detectives combing through Sarah's phone records, emails, and work logs. What they uncovered painted a startling picture. Explicit emails between Sarah and Daniel surfaced, detailing a relationship that had grown increasingly volatile. In one exchange, Sarah expressed frustration with Daniel's reluctance to leave his wife. In another, Daniel pleaded with her for patience, saying he needed more time. It was clear from the tone of their correspondence that Sarah had been growing impatient and Daniel had been feeling cornered. Detective Brinsifin called Daniel Hartniak in for questioning on February 14, 2013, a cold winter morning that mirrored the tension in the room. Daniel arrived in uniform, his usual composed demeanor faltering as Brinsifin began to probe. At first, Daniel denied any involvement with Sarah beyond a professional relationship, but when the emails and text messages were presented, his resolve cracked. He admitted to the affair, though he downplayed its significance, describing it as a mistake he had been trying to end. The investigation into Daniel's private life revealed a man far more complicated than his public persona. Daniel had married Leah when they were both in their early 20s. At the time, he had been a fresh recruit at the police academy, and Leah had been working as a teaching assistant. Their life together had seemed idyllic: family vacations to the coast, community barbecues, and Christmas cards sent to nearly everyone they knew. But Daniel's career consumed him, leaving little time for his family. Leah had become more involved in community projects, filling the void his absence created. Their relationship devolved into polite but distant cohabitation. The pressure of balancing a failing marriage, the demands of his job, and the intensity of his affair with Sarah had pushed Daniel to a breaking point. His colleagues began to notice subtle changes in him during the weeks leading up to Sarah's death. He was more irritable, prone to snapping at junior officers during briefings. Some chalked it up to job stress, but in hindsight, it seemed like a man unraveling under the weight of his secrets. Meanwhile, the autopsy results added another layer to the mystery. The medical examiner concluded that Sarah had been shot at close range, but the angle of entry made it impossible for her to have pulled the trigger herself. It was a staged self-exit, and the evidence suggested premeditation. The investigators were certain they were dealing with a homicide, and all signs pointed to Daniel. The forensic team delivered a breakthrough on February 20, 2013. A routine search of Daniel Hartniak's car turned up a jacket that tested positive for gunpowder residue. This discovery, combined with CCTV footage from a nearby traffic camera, placed Daniel's car less than half a mile from Sarah's house on the night of the murder. Daniel claimed he had been conducting a routine patrol, but the timing was suspicious. He had logged off duty hours earlier. Maya Sinreeve also provided a critical piece of information. In her second interview, she recalled hearing her mother arguing with Daniel in their kitchen just days before the murder. Maya hadn't been able to make out every word, but Sarah's voice had been sharp and insistent, while Daniel's tone was low and tense. After the argument, Sarah had stormed upstairs, slamming her bedroom door, while Daniel left without saying goodbye. The argument, coupled with Sarah's emails threatening to reveal their affair to Leah, painted a picture of a relationship spiraling out of control. Detective Brensefin began to see the pieces falling into place. Daniel, fearing the collapse of his marriage and career, had the motive, the means, and now the opportunity to silence Sarah permanently. As the evidence mounted, the pressure on Daniel intensified. Colleagues who had once admired him began to distance themselves. Rumors swirled through the department, and the media caught wind of the investigation, though details were kept tightly under wraps. Daniel's composed facade started to crumble, and he began avoiding contact with anyone outside his immediate family. Detective Brensefin, however, wasn't ready to arrest Daniel just yet. He wanted every piece of evidence in place, knowing the case would be heavily scrutinized. The investigation continued, but one thing was clear. The walls were closing in on Daniel Hartniak. Detective Michael Brensefin knew the key to solving a case often lay hidden in the smallest details. As the investigation into Sarah Sinreeve's murder entered its third week, every lead pointed back to Daniel Hartniak. But there was still one glaring question. Why now? What could have driven Daniel, a man with a pristine reputation, to risk everything in such a violent and permanent way? The answer, it turned out, was buried in his financial records. Brensefin had assigned a junior detective to comb through Daniel's bank statements, credit reports, and financial history. What they discovered on March 1, 2013, sent shockwaves through the team. Just a month earlier, Leah Hartniak, Daniel's wife, had inherited a staggering $1 million from her late father, an affluent businessman. The inheritance was a life-changing amount, deposited directly into a joint account Daniel shared with Leah. But there was a catch. If Leah filed for divorce, Daniel would lose access to that money entirely. This revelation painted Daniel's actions in a new light. The stakes were no longer just his marriage or reputation. They were financial survival. If Sarah had followed through on her threats to expose their affair, the fallout would have been catastrophic. Leah would undoubtedly have left him, and Daniel's career would have been irreparably damaged. Faced with losing everything, Daniel's desperation seemed to have reached a breaking point. Yet, just as the team began to solidify their case against Daniel, a new shadow of doubt emerged. Leah Hartniak, the woman at the heart of Daniel's potential unraveling, became a suspect herself. Leah had been quiet during the investigation, maintaining a calm and composed exterior. She had told detectives she had spent the evening of February 11, 2013, at home with her children, helping them with homework and preparing for a charity event at their church. But as Brensefin and his team delved deeper, cracks began to appear in her story. A witness came forward on March 1, 2013, claiming to have seen a car matching Leah's parked near Sarah's home on the night of the murder. The description was specific enough to raise eyebrows: a black sedan with a bike rack on the back, just like the one Leah drove. The timeline matched the estimated time of death, and suddenly the possibility of Leah confronting Sarah became a real consideration. Detectives began to reconsider Leah's potential role in crime. Could she have found out about the affair and taken matters into her own hands? There's no denying she had motive. The affair was a betrayal of her marriage, her family, and her carefully constructed life. Leah was known for her temper, and several acquaintances hinted at a darker side beneath her polished image. If she had discovered Sarah's existence, her fury might have driven her to confront Sarah with devastating consequences. But there were also reasons to doubt Leah's involvement. She had no known history of violence, and her behavior during the investigation had been cooperative, if somewhat reserved. Her alibi, though shaky, was partially corroborated by her older son, who remembered her being home that evening. Still, the lingering possibility that she had played a part in the crime added a layer of complexity to the case, forcing the detectives to broaden their scope, even as the evidence against Daniel mounted. By March 8, 2013, the case against Daniel Hartniak had reached a critical point. Forensic analysis of the bullet recovered from Sarah Sinreeve's body confirmed what detectives had suspected all along. It came from Daniel's service weapon. The weapon, reported missing by Daniel a week before the murder, had been found at the scene, conveniently placed to suggest a self-exit. But the meticulous work of the crime lab revealed Daniel's fingerprints on the gun's grip, a damning piece of evidence he couldn't explain away. The final nail in Daniel's coffin came from surveillance footage. Detectives had pieced together his movements on the night of the murder, tracking his car to within blocks of Sarah's house during the critical hours. The gunpowder residue found on his jacket only further implicated him, solidifying the timeline. While Daniel maintained his innocence, claiming the evidence was circumstantial, the truth was clear to Brinsefin and his team. Daniel had both the motive and the means to kill Sarah Sinreeve. The arrest was carried out in the early hours of March 10, 2013, while the Hartniak family slept. Brinsefin had made the call to execute the warrant at dawn, hoping to minimize the scene's impact on Daniel's two young sons. But no amount of planning could soften the blow of what was to come. When officers arrived at Daniel's suburban home, Leah answered the door, visibly disoriented in her robe and slippers. She was given a little time to process what was happening before Daniel was handcuffed and escorted out. The children, awakened by the commotion, stood at the top of the stairs, their faces pale with confusion and fear. Leah's expression shifted from shock to fury, but whether her anger was directed at Daniel or the officers was unclear. Daniel maintained his composure as he was placed in the back of a patrol car, but his eyes betrayed his growing panic. The neighbors, already peeking through curtains and stepping onto their porches, began whispering amongst themselves. The once admired trooper was now a man marked by scandal and suspicion, his carefully constructed life unraveling in front of everyone. Back at the station, Daniel was charged with first-degree murder. His silence during the booking process was deafening, a stark contrast to his earlier defiance during questioning. He requested a lawyer immediately, but the weight of the evidence against him left little room for doubt. Leah, though initially questioned as a potential co-conspirator, was not formally implicated due to a lack of concrete evidence. Her role in the case remained ambiguous, leaving the detectives and the community to speculate about her possible involvement. Had she been complicit in the cover-up, or was she another victim of Daniel's lies and betrayal? The truth, for now, remained elusive. As the sun rose over the quiet streets of Middlebury, the town was left reeling. The arrest of Daniel Hartniak, a once respected figure in the community, marked the beginning of a long and painful journey for everyone involved. For Detective Brinsefin, the case was far from over, but one thing was certain. The tangled web of love, lies, and betrayal that led to Sarah Sinreeve's death had forever changed the lives of those left behind. The trial of Daniel Hartniak began in August 2014, drawing national attention to a case that had already captivated the small community of Middlebury, Vermont. The courtroom, packed with reporters, curious locals, and those directly affected by the tragedy, buzzed with anticipation. The once respected state trooper now sat at the defendant's table, his clean-cut image replaced by a somber, weathered face. Daniel wore the weight of his choices in every tense movement, his gaze fixed downward as the prosecution laid bare the tangled web of betrayal and murder. For the prosecution, the case was clear-cut. Assistant District Attorney Sophia Dirax, a seasoned litigator with a reputation for being relentless in high-profile cases, painted Daniel as a desperate man. She methodically built the story of a state trooper who had risked everything for an affair with a colleague, only to kill her when she became a threat to his carefully constructed life. Dirax emphasized Daniel's financial motives, highlighting how Leah Hartniak's recent inheritance of $1 million had become a crucial factor. A divorce would not only expose the affair, but strip him of the financial stability he coveted. The prosecution's case relied heavily on forensic evidence. Dirax presented the findings of the crime scene, the ballistic match between Daniel's service weapon and the fatal bullet, the gunpowder residue found on his jacket, and the surveillance footage placing him near Sarah's home on the night of the murder. Each piece of evidence further painted Daniel as a man cornered by his own actions, lashing out in violence to protect his reputation. A pivotal moment came when Maya Sin-Reeve, Sarah's teenage daughter, took the stand. Maya's testimony was heart-wrenching, laying bare the emotional toll the affair and subsequent murder had taken on her young life. Maya recounted the arguments she had overheard between her mother and Daniel in the weeks leading up to the murder. While her voice trembled, she remained composed, describing how Sarah had grown increasingly anxious and angry, often pacing the house late at night. Maya's perspective gave the jury a glimpse into Sarah's final days, filled with fear and frustration as she realized the dangerous path her relationship with Daniel had taken. Maya's testimony wasn't just about her mother's state of mind. It also illuminated the tension between Daniel and Sarah. She described hearing Daniel's voice raised during an argument with her mother just days before the murder. While Maya didn't understand all the details at the time, her account added a deeply personal layer to the prosecution's narrative. The court watched in silence as Maya, now living with her aunt and uncle, broke down in tears, mourning the loss of her mother while grappling with the betrayal that had shattered her family. The defense, led by attorney James Furcello, fought to cast doubt on the prosecution's case. Furcello, a calm and calculated lawyer, argued that Daniel was being framed. He pointed to Leah Hartniak as a potential suspect, raising questions about her whereabouts on the night of the murder and her possible jealousy over the affair. Furcello claimed that Leah had far more to lose emotionally than Daniel, portraying her as an unstable woman driven to desperate measures. Furcello also attempted to undermine the forensic evidence, suggesting that the crime scene had been tampered with or mishandled by investigators. He argued that Daniel's fingerprints on the weapon could have been transferred under innocent circumstances, and he downplayed the significance of the gunpowder residue, calling it inconclusive. However, the defense's strategy faltered when Leah Hartniak took the stand under immunity. Her testimony was a defining moment in the trial. Leah, poised but visibly shaken, portrayed herself as a betrayed wife grappling with the humiliation of her husband's infidelity. She described how she had discovered the affair shortly before Sarah's murder, but had chosen to confront Daniel privately rather than act out in anger. Leah's composure and the consistency of her account painted her as a victim rather than a perpetrator, effectively dismantling the defense's attempts to implicate her. Her testimony also shed light on Daniel's demeanor in the weeks leading up to the murder. Leah described him as agitated and withdrawn, often leaving the house late at night without explanation. She told the jury that while she had hoped to repair their marriage for the sake of their children, she had sensed that Daniel was spiraling out of control. By the time the prosecution rested its case, the jury had been presented with a damning portrait of Daniel Hartniak. The financial motive, the forensic evidence, and the emotional testimonies combined to paint a picture of a man who had crossed every line to protect himself. The defense's attempts to cast doubt fell flat, especially in light of Leah's compelling testimony. On a fresh morning in October 2014, the jury returned its verdict. The courtroom was tense, the air heavy with anticipation. Daniel Hartniak, once a pillar of the community, stood motionless as the foreman read the decision, guilty of first-degree murder. The sentence, life without the possibility of parole, was handed down swiftly, leaving no room for leniency. The verdict sent shock waves through the state police force. Daniel's colleagues, many of whom had testified to his professional excellence, were left grappling with the betrayal of one of their own. For a department built on trust and integrity, the revelation of Daniel's actions cast a long shadow. For Maya Sin-Reeve, the verdict marked a bittersweet moment. While it brought a sense of justice for her mother, it couldn't erase the pain of her loss. Maya moved in with relatives out of state, where she began rebuilding her life. Inspired by her mother's strength and the tragic events that unfolded, Maya became an advocate for victims of domestic violence and betrayal, speaking out about the devastating consequences of unchecked desperation and manipulation. Leah Hartniak, now free from the weight of her marriage, moved away from Middlebury to escape the whispers and judgment of the community. While she tried to rebuild her life, the scars of Daniel's betrayal lingered, leaving her forever tied to a case that had consumed her family. The case of Daniel Hartniak and Sarah Sinreeve remains a chilling reminder of how passion, betrayal, and desperation can lead to unimaginable acts. The trial, with its emotional testimonies and shocking revelations, continues to haunt those who live through it, a testament to the fragile balance between love and destruction. What drives a person to such extremes? Was Daniel's betrayal fueled solely by fear of exposure, or were there darker secrets yet to be uncovered? In the small town of Middlebury, questions linger even as justice is served. Stay tuned for more stories that peel back the layers of human behavior, exposing the darkest corners of the human heart. Thank you for being with us on this episode of Tom's True Crime. If you are interested in more in-depth investigations into the most perplexing crimes, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. What are your thoughts about this case? Please share them with us in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe.